Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the May Lunch and Learn at the Harmon Museum. I'm John Zimkus, the Education Director and Historian here. Our upcoming events on June 7th will be the second annual Lebanon Festival of the Arts. It was such a success last year. You'll thoroughly enjoy it. We'll have some 50 artisans in booths up in front of Broadway. This part of Broadway will be blocked off. There will be some 12 performers. Some of them will be here in the conference center. Some will be in the Village Green. Last year we had marionettes. We had an accordion orchestra. We had singers, some on the stage outside. There will be the cabin open up and crafts will be done there. It's really a great experience. It's totally free. I think you'll enjoy it. Saturday, June 7th. On June 12th, our last of the Music at the Museum, our final concert. Jay Mills, the music of Broadway. Those of you from Lebanon may know Jay, such a talented musician. 51 years ago, he played at my wife and I, our wedding. And it's amazing for a 7-year-old kid to be that good. But that'll be on 7 o'clock on June 12th. Very talented and a good friend, Jay Mills. On Tuesday, the 17th, in front of the Harmon Hall on Broadway, once again the street will be blocked off. There will be an unveiling of a bronze statue of Dr. Joseph Warren, the Revolutionary War veteran, he could have been a founding father, but he died in the Battle of Bunker Hill in the first 2 months. So he became, as one historian put it, a founding martyr. There are some 14 states which have a Warren County named after him. 6 of them are actually part of the original 13 colonies, but we were number 4 to be named after him. So we actually had a Warren County before some of the 13 original states had a Warren County. And we are also the largest Warren County in the country. And this will be a dedication. I'll be doing a little talk. We'll have a speaker who has written a book on Dr. Warren. There'll be the unveiling of the statue. And like I say, once again, it'll be on Broadway. The street will be blocked off. You can see the base for it in front of the Harmon Hall next door. Okay, on June 8th, there's going to be Captain Howard A. Mills Flag Collection, sponsored by the Sons of the American Revolution. Dozens and dozens of American flags, pennants, and battle flags throughout the history of the United States will be on display in the Semendinger Gallery. I've seen it once before. Good 10 years ago, we had a lunch and learn about the flags, but it'll be part of our display for about 6 weeks, starting on July 8th. On July 7th through the 14th, History Camp. For like the 32nd or 33rd year, we will have History Camp. And the topic is, how do you get there from here? And it's all about transportation. And we'll be talking about Neil Armstrong and his space journey. We will visit Carillon Park and see the number 3 Wright Flyer. Interesting fact about the number 3 Wright Flyer. Orville Wright, who lived till 1947, helped repair that flyer by taking parts off the number 2. So number 1 is in the Smithsonian, number 2 doesn't exist anymore, and number 3 has been put together, the most successful of the early flyers. That's one reason why they wanted to preserve that. That is on display. But we'll also be talking about canals and railroad and what have you. So it should be a pretty good lunch and learn. We have currently near the cabin a grindstone made of Berea sandstone coming from the Marietta area. It's a new, the cabin, as you know, is a 1795 cabin, which was at about 4 miles away from where we are right now. And we had it reconstructed and put over there, but near it is now one of the most important things in early settlers. It is a grinding stone for a mill. And so you can take a look at that. Please remember that when you are with us here, the museum is free. Take a look at the museum. See the new Ashley Ford and Barbara Ford Maritime exhibit. It's only about a month old. And it was just not quite open last time you may have been here. But there's also discounts at the gift shop, 20% on regular items, 10% on consignment items. So there's a lot of things to see and do after our meal and after our very good speakers. So hopefully you will stay and take advantage of that. Okay? Well, enjoy your meal, and I'll talk to you again in a little bit. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the May Lunch and Learn here at the Harmon Museum. Today we have as our guest Judy Pearson. Judy was born in the suburb of Pittsburgh, received her BS degree in nursing at Case Western Reserve University, and her Master of Science in Education at Boston University. As she writes, in 1974, she wanted to see the world, so she joined the United States Air Force and spent 3 different stations in Ohio. She did, however, go to England, and she and her husband, Bob, also from the Air Force, spent 5 years there, and that's where their 2 daughters were born. Having joint assignments and active duty is kind of difficult to arrange, so she decided to separate from active duty and entered the Air Force Reserve. She spent privileges of holding several different positions, from a staff nurse to a flight nurse instructor in 3 different aircraft. As a flight clinical coordinator, she is only one of 12 nurses in the world to coordinate worldwide aeromedical evacuation. She was deployed twice within the United States during Desert Shield and Desert Storm. Some of her decorations and military awards are the Air Force Commendation Medal with 2 oak leaf clusters, the Air Force Meritorious Service Medal with 2 oak leaf clusters, and the Legion of Merit. In civilian life, she works at a vocational school as a nursing instructor with the Visitors Nursing Association of Southwest Ohio. She has coordinated the largest influenza immunization program in the tri-state area. For the last 8 years, she has had the honor and privilege of being the Ohio ambassador for the Military Women's Memorial in Arlington Cemetery. It is our nation's only major memorial to honor the service of women who have defended our freedom. It is my great pleasure to introduce retired Colonel Judy Pearson from the United States Air Force.
Thank you so much. Bob and I are so honored to be here and appreciate your flexibility. We were supposed to be here months ago, and somebody had to have heart surgery, so we certainly appreciate your flexibility, John. And if I would have known that that introduction was going to be read, I would have made it a flu shot program, not an influenza immunization. But Bob and I retired from the Air Force. We have 42 and a half years between us. Our daughter she went to the Air Force Academy and then served 12 years. She taught at the Air Force Academy. Our older daughter is an executive with Mercy Bon Secours Health. We live down in Mason now, and like John said, for the last 8 years, I have been privileged to be representing the women who have defended our freedom. And Bob and I go everywhere as a team. He's tech support, which we think is hysterical. It's kind of like the blind leading the blind. But we are pleased to be here. So what I'd like to tell you today is a little bit about this hidden gem, because one of my prime roles as an ambassador is to increase the awareness of the public that this actually exists, and to encourage our women veterans, of which I know we have 2 here, to tell their stories so it doesn't get lost in history. Then we're going to go outside. In 2021 was the 100th anniversary of the Tomb of Our Unknown Soldier. And because of where we're located, we partnered closely with the honor guards of the tomb to commemorate that year. So we're going to talk a little bit about how America came to have an unknown soldier. We'll finish touring the inside of our museum and memorial, and then we'll talk about why it's important that we record the stories of women. So, in the early 1930s, America wanted a fitting entrance to Arlington because now we had an unknown soldier interred there and people were visiting a lot. And so they hired the most prestigious architectural firm of the day, and they built this facade. They never finished it. And what I'd like you to look at is the line in the middle of the road. Keep that in mind. They never finished it because people stopped coming. It was the Depression. And so nobody was visiting. And it fell into significant disrepair. So fast forward now to the 60s, when a group of World War II women veterans was touring Washington, D.C. And they saw the Jefferson Memorial, the Lincoln Monument, the Washington. They're all men. There was nothing to honor their service. And you just don't do that to women veterans. But it took until the 80s when Representative Mary Rose Ocar from Ohio teamed with Senator Murkowski, and they drafted legislation which President Reagan signed into public law that something should be built to honor the service of the women who have defended our freedom, with the proviso that no federal funds be used in the building, which is normal when you're building a monument or a memorial. So they formed a foundation, the Women in Military Service for America Foundation. They needed a head of the foundation. General Wilma Vaught, Air Force, missed a meeting, and she got a phone call. Congratulations, Wilma. You are the president of the foundation. So it was through General Vaught's foresight, her fundraising efforts, the group raised $22 million in private and corporate donations. They held a design competition, and over 30 architectural firms wanted to be part of the repurposing of that original facade. They had worked with the Monuments Department, the Park Service, and they decided that that would be the fitting place to build our memorial. The architectural firm that won, his mom just happened to be a World War II veteran. And she said to him, "You will enter this, and you will win it." Yes, Mom, I did, and I did. So, in 1995, they broke ground. It took that long. They broke ground. And it's really nice that President and Mrs. Clinton were there, but the really important figure in that picture is the Air Force officer in the middle. That's General Wilma Vaught. It was through her that the memorial kept going in the rough times. She put a second mortgage on her house to keep the memorial afloat. She is in her 90s. She still comes into the office and oversees everything that's going on with the memorial. So they built out the original facade. Federal funds were used to do that, the original facade, to clean it up. And then the private donations were used to build out our memorial. And today, our memorial sits on 4.2 acres at the entrance to Arlington National Cemetery. The blue panel, some of the best views of Washington, D.C. are from the rooftop of our memorial. The blue panels that you see are glass, and on those glass panels are etched words by women veterans and about women veterans. And when the sun shines, those words reflect down into the memorial itself. So they not only provide inspiration, they provide natural light. Remember, I told you to keep in mind that line in the middle of the road. Here it is, 50 years later. If you are at the Lincoln Memorial and you turn toward Arlington, that line goes across Memorial Bridge through the Military Women's Memorial, where it's picked up with black granite pavers through the middle of the memorial. And in your mind's eye, draw a line up to the Lee Mansion. Bless you. That line was originally designed to symbolically reunite the North and the South. The fountain in the center, when it's turned on, again, bless you. When it's turned on, sounds like women's voices. Everything is symbolic inside of the memorial. On Dedication Day, over 40,000 women veterans, their friends, their families came to celebrate the fact that something was finally ours. Something was finally dedicated to honoring our service. The DAR led the procession across Memorial Bridge, and the head of the DAR was in her uniform with her drum and beat cadence. It was amazing. So let's go inside. The first thing that you see is a purposely commissioned statue called the Pledge. It was commissioned by the Working Dog, the Handlers Association. And it is a military working dog in battle gear, eye to eye with his female handler in her battle gear. And the pledge is, not only will they keep each other safe, they will keep our democracy safe. We have a beautiful multi-purpose room, aptly named the General Wilma Vaught Room. And it can be reconfigured into any meeting space or promotion space that you need. We have museum-quality galleries that depict every era that American women have been involved in, from the Revolutionary War through today. The families have donated memorabilia. The women themselves have donated their uniforms or their words. These are amazing spaces. And there are 4 sets of stairways that go up to the outer area. You'll love this. These stairways literally break through the glass ceiling. We are in the middle right now of fundraising to upgrade those exhibits. Thanks to the museum here, they gave a very generous donation. And what we're trying to do is upgrade the exhibit areas so that they're more interactive, more engaging, especially for families, so that when you stand in the World War II gallery, You'll hear the sounds of World War II around you. You will hear the voices of the women and their accounts of what they went through. We also have an amazing lending library where we have educational material that will go out to schools when they request information about women's military history. We have a great library. Our curator is phenomenal. So it's not just the surface that you see. There's a lot going on, and we have a very small but an amazingly mighty staff. This is a very special area. It's our Hall of Honor. And it honors our fallen women. Those are the flags, by the way, that were carried in the dedication parade. The women's families have donated their uniforms, have donated memorabilia. There is a book with the names of all of our fallen women. It's a very, very sacred spot. But let's go outside for a minute and talk about the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. How did America come to have an unknown soldier? After the war, England had an unknown soldier interred in Westminster Abbey. France had one under the Arc de Triomphe. Those were central places where their citizens could go and remember and honor their dead. But here in America, we had nothing like that because transport wasn't good to get bodies across the ocean. So our soldiers were either buried where they fell or in mass cemeteries throughout Europe, primarily in France. So it was decided that America too would have an unknown soldier. They sent out 4 teams with the instructions to exhume the remains of 4 unidentified warriors. Those remains were placed in 4 identical, unmarked coffins and brought to a central place in France. Nobody knew where they came from. There were no markings. They were all covered with American flags. And on the appointed day, 3 of our soldiers were asked to come to that makeshift morgue. And they thought they were going to be pallbearers for our unknown soldier. Instead, Sergeant Edward Younger was handed a spray of white roses. And he was told that he would choose our unknown soldier. The roses were a gift from a prominent French rose-growing family who had lost 2 sons in the war. It was their gift to America to say thank you. And Sergeant Younger was told that he was to place that spray of roses on the top of the casket that he chose as our unknown soldier. He was taken into the room and left alone. And he said the enormity of what he was about to do was so great that all he could do was kneel and pray. And when he collected himself, he got up and he began to walk around the caskets. And he said he didn't know why, but he was drawn to the 3rd casket, whether he had served with that man, whether he knew him personally, he had no idea. But he took the spray of roses, put it on the top of the casket, and he said immediately the weight was lifted. He went out into the sunshine, saluted smartly, and said the decision had been made. Our soldier was taken through the streets of France to lay in state, and you can see the white roses on the top of the casket. Sergeant Younger is in the foreground. And he was laying in state for 24 hours, and thousands of French citizens came to pay their respects and say thank you. And many of them were mothers who had lost sons in the war. And they knelt and they prayed and they cried. Meanwhile, over in Philadelphia Navy Yard, the USS Olympia was being prepared. She had been chosen for the greatest mission of her career. She had been Admiral Dewey's flagship at the Battle of Manila, but this was the highlight. She was going to bring home our unknown soldier. So all the way across the Atlantic, her crew polished and shined to make her ready. And when she got to Le Havre, France, our soldier was taken through the streets of France one last time on a horse-drawn caisson. Thousands, you can see, thousands of people were there waving American flags, many of them, to say thank you. And by the way, most of these pictures come directly from the honor guards of the tomb. Our soldier was taken on board the Olympia to great fanfare, many speeches, many wreaths. And when it was all over, they went to take him below decks. But the casket wouldn't fit through the hatchways. So the Marines guarding him tethered the casket to the decks of the Olympia. And she took off into open water. In the middle of the Atlantic, directly in her path, 3 major storms were converging, and she ran right into them. And it was said in the captain's log that the men were eating below decks with 6 inches of water around their ankles, that the waves were so big they threatened to overtake the bridge. For their own safety, the Marines were told to go to their quarters, but they wouldn't leave our soldier alone. They tethered themselves to the decks of the Olympia, and they rode out the storm. When she got to the Potomac, it was so foggy they couldn't tell where she was as she made her way up the Potomac. The only way they knew was by the occasional volley of honor shots that were fired to mark her position as she came forward. And she came to Washington Navy Yard. Many, many dignitaries. I love the next picture because handwritten underneath, it says the Olympia bears the body of America's unknown hero. He was taken off by the Marines, and if you could see the top of the casket, the white roses are laying there. And the Marines transferred responsibility to the Army. He was taken to our capital, where he laid in state for 3 days. 24 hours a day, people came to pay respects. And like in France, many of them were mothers, wives, who had lost their loved one. And like in France, they knelt and prayed and cried. And on November 11th, 1921, our soldier made his last journey. He was taken by horse-drawn caisson to Arlington. Every member of Congress, every member of the diplomatic corps, representatives from each service walked behind the caisson. And when they got to Arlington, wreath laying, speeches, and then Chief Plentycous, who was the chief of the Crow Nation, stepped forward. The chief had been chosen to represent all the Native Americans who served during the war. And he laid his coup stick, adorned with eagle feathers that represented all of his battles, laid it on the top of the tomb. And then he slowly reached up and took off that beautiful war bonnet. He laid it on the top of the tomb with the words, This is a gift from one warrior to another. If you go to Arlington today, to the museum that's right across from the tomb, the chief's coup stick and war bonnet have been preserved, and you can see them. And if you go to Arlington and climb over enough fences, you can find Sergeant Younger's grave. Bob and I did that, and it's just a grave. This man chose our unknown soldier, and it's just a marker like everybody else's marker. Many people came over the years to pay their respects, but they would bring picnics, and they would sit and picnic because the views were stunning of Washington, D.C. They finally had to post a guard from sunup to sunset. The tomb, as we know it, was dedicated to the public in 1932. And in 1937, they posted a military guard 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And since 1937, our soldier has never been left alone. In spite of weather, terrorist attacks, our soldier has been attended constantly. Now, if you go, the tomb, there's a crypt, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. The Vietnam soldier was an Air Force pilot. His remains were identified, and his family wanted him to come home. That crypt is empty, and it will forever be empty. But on the top is a memorial to our POWs and MIAs. So let's go back inside the memorial and tie it all together. Those 3 stones that you see in our Hall of Honor, they're called the Sister Stones. They were quarried at the same time from the same quarry as the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And they were held in reserve in case anything happened to the tomb. If it was cracked or defaced, they would have used one of those to replace the defective part. But when we opened, they donated them to us. And now the Sister Stones stand in quiet honor to our fallen women, as the tomb itself stands in quiet honor to all of our fallen. But what makes our memorial a living, breathing memorial is the registration area. The very cool part about this memorial is you don't have to be dead to be in it. And this is where all of you come in, because everybody knows a woman veteran somehow, either in your families, the lady down the street. You know, we went into a 7-Eleven. There was a young woman behind the counter, and she had an Army jacket on. Oh, what's your connection? So I went out, and she was in the Guard. Went out and got my stuff, and when I brought my card back in, the young girl beside her was taking a picture of it, and I said, why are you doing that? And she said, oh, my friend just went into the Air Force. I'm going to tell her about this and register her. The young Army girl goes, if I do this, my mother is going to be so excited, she's going to cry. So you never know. You know, you just never know where you're going to meet somebody. And when a woman tells her story, and it's free to do this, generations from now, people can type in her name, and her story will come up. What you want the world to know about your grandma, or what the individual woman wants to know, what the world wants the world to know about her service. So we just happen to have brought information, and we can help you to register today, or take it home with you, consult with other family members if it's a long-lost relative. You don't need a lot of information if it's a deceased relative. But I urge you, have them take their place in history. Because if we don't tell those stories, they're either going to get lost or someone else is going to tell the story and inevitably get it wrong. And let me give you a prime example of that. The Women's Army Corps was established, and First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt was a great proponent of African American women being admitted to the Army. And then when overseas assignments were opened to white women, she and her friend, Dr. Mary Bethune, advocated that African American women should also be included in overseas assignments. But the mail during World War II was not moving at all. People at home were not getting mail from the front. People in the front were not getting mail from home. And the Army figured it would take 6 months to relieve the backlog. There was no morale because of the lack of mail. And so they founded the 6888 Central Postal Directory Battalion. Bob's going to play Vanna and walk around. So they founded the 6888 Central Postal Directory Battalion. It was the only all-black, all-women's battalion to serve overseas during World War II. The women trained at Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia. They learned to identify enemy aircraft. They climbed over barriers, through mud, with rucksacks, just the same kind of training. And they shipped out of New York, bound for England. They arrived in Scotland on Valentine's Day to a barrage of bombs falling. They scattered, gathered themselves back together, and went on to Birmingham, England. The unit itself was commanded by Major Charity Adams, who eventually settled in Dayton. And when you go to Dayton, there's a lot of stuff named after Major Adams, or at the end of the war, Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams Early. And the women's whole theme was no mail, low morale. So they organized themselves into 3 shifts, 24 hours a day. And by the end of the war, they had 70 million cards with service numbers, names that they cross-referenced. And they would spend 30 days trying to find the owner of one piece of mail. And if they didn't, they would then send it back to the sender. When they arrived in Birmingham, they were met with 6 airplane hangars stacked floor to ceiling with backlogged mail. It was February. It was cold. They wore long johns under their uniforms, under their coats. The windows were blacked out due to night air raids. Yay! And they were rat infested because the rats were looking for the cakes and the cookies that were degrading in the packages in the hangars. There were, for example, 7,500 Robert Smiths. But it wasn't just Robert Smith, it was Bob Smith, Rob Smith, Robbie Smith, and don't forget Bert Smith. The women worked tirelessly. They were not welcome in the USO or in any places that the Americans set up. But the British welcomed them warmly, and they made many friends while they were there. And one morning, the commanding general came and wanted to inspect the troops. So Major Adams got everybody who wasn't working or sleeping for the inspection. The commander was livid because not all the women were there. And he famously turned to her and said, "I am going to bring one of my white first lieutenants down here to show you how to run this unit." And she very famously turned to him and said, "Over my dead body, sir." It almost cost her a court-martial. She threatened to sue him, he threatened to court-martial her, and luckily everybody got talked down. By the end of the war, they were very close friends. I always read these because they processed an average of 65,000 pieces of mail per shift, 195,000 pieces of mail per day, 5,850,000 pieces per month, and in 3 months, not the anticipated 6, they cleared 17,550,000 pieces of mail. That was an average of 32 and a half pieces of mail per hour per woman. But no good deed goes unpunished. They were sent to Rouen, France. And it was in Rouen, France, that they were met with a 2 to 3 year backlog of mail. They did it all over again. While they were in Rouen, word that American females were now on the continent spread. And so men, black and white, now had business in Rouen. And they went. The security police for the women were not issued weapons. So they went and they learned judo. And that really seemed to dissuade a lot of the male visitors from coming to visit them. They cleared the backlog in France, or in Rouen, but it was there that tragedy struck the unit. 3 of the women were killed in a Jeep accident. The government gave no funding for funerals, so the women collected their money. Some of the women had mortuary experience and they tended to the bodies. There are 4 women buried at Normandy. 3 of the 4 are from the 6888. The women were sent on to Paris, where the war had really taken its toll. And so they worked with German POWs and French citizens to clear the mail, which was tremendously backlogged. But they realized that because of what the French didn't have, they were taking things out of the packages. So every night before they ended a shift, the women had to search their counterparts to retrieve what should have been in the packages. And by then, morale was so low, and some of the women were eligible to be out of the military and were gone. The unit strength was getting smaller, and so the unit was disbanded, sent home with no fanfare, no medals, no thank yous, no nothing. Their story was lost until the mid-90s, when they began to be invited back into the homes of the British. When we opened in '97, Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams Early spoke at the dedication. But the story was lost. And it wasn't until 2021 when the unit was finally approved for a Congressional Gold Medal. That medal was just awarded about 3 weeks ago. There are 2 surviving members of the 6888. That's why we record stories. Do you know who the Hello Girls were? We do, because we have that story recorded, and we tell it. Cadet Nurse Corps. My mom, her story is recorded. Please, if you know a woman veteran, if you are a woman veteran, do not leave today without finding out how to register them. I thank you so much for having us here today. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. Come and see what we brought. We're very excited. Thank you so much, John.
Well, thank you so much, Judy. That was fascinating and very moving. Does anyone have any questions right now? Yes, sir.
Thanks, Ken.
One thing you told me, Judy, we've never had to draft a woman
Nope.
in the history of our country.
Nope.
All women have volunteered. And how many women have we lost since 9/11?
You know, I knew you were going to ask that. I want to say 100 and some. We have had over, thank you, 3 million women serve our country since the revolution. And to date, none of them have been drafted. And to date, we have about 325,000 registered on the memorial. Dan, a question?
Yeah, I did. I wondered, first off, where you were showing this Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, was the building in the background, was that the
That's-
memorial?
No.
No. Okay.
No, that's the museum, the Arlington Museum. The Women's Memorial, if you go to Arlington and you go to the Visitor Center and you walk down the little path, you turn left to go see President Kennedy, turn right, and we are right there. And it's really, no, that's the museum, the Arlington Museum. It's frustrating because honor flights will go to Arlington and they will either pass by and go, oh, there it is, or they will drop their women off and say, we'll pick you up when we're done with the rest. You know, but men are just as interested because men know women veterans, men served with women. Aunt Tilly was a veteran, you know. That's why you come into play and you're so important. Thank you.
I have another question. if it's
Sure.
okay. Does the foundation fund the entire museum, the operation and the staff?
We, and that was a big concern right now, is that we would be shut down. But we are privately funded. We have very, very few federal funds. We don't turn them down if we're offered, but most of the funding comes through private donations. Thank you.
As a museum staff member, I would like to know about your storage underneath your memorial. Is there basements for storage?
I don't know. They keep it in a separate area that's all temperature controlled. We have a curator who is phenomenal. And if you go to Women's Memorial YouTube channel, there's an interview with our curator.
Okay.
And it tells all about it. There are some fascinating stories. YouTube Women's Memorial. Spanish-American War nurses, aerospace nurses, the nurses who cared for the astronauts, who went through exactly the same training that the original astronauts did so they would know what they were treating. There are some phenomenal stories on there.
The big women's clinic at the VA was renamed for her.
Yes, it was. We were there at the dedication. We were there at the dedication. We had the display. There is also a school in Dayton. We were speaking up there, and a gentleman was a mural painter. And he came up afterwards. He goes, now I know. They were painting a mural in a school, and they had Major Charity Adams there. And he said, now I know why she was important, you know?
Well, thank you so very much, Judy. Thank you for coming. Next month, I will have the honor of being your speaker. The topic will be following the tracks of the Underground Railroad in Warren County. It'll be the day before Juneteenth. And then in July, Ashley Ford and Barbara Ford. Ashley is the man who donated the fantastic maritime new exhibit we have. He'll be talking about his exhibit and the many things he's been involved with in ships in his life. So thank you for coming. Don't forget the discount at the gift shop, and don't forget to wander through the Harmon Museum. We'll see you next month.